All right, hey everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's our Zoom at noon class on metronomes with Keaton Thandi. Keaton's got a bunch of cool ways that you can actually use this metronome, get creative with it, and not just look at it as this tick tock quarter note tool to help you practice, but something that you can really use to push your playing to the next level. So we are going I'm going to kick it off to Keaton here in a second, but if you have any questions while you're here, there's a chat feature down the bottom, so you can actually just type your question into the chat. I keep an eye on that so I can relay it to Keaton. And we record everything so you can watch it later. So that's pretty much the background on it all. Let's kick it over.
Awesome. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's great in their homes right now and staying safe. So like Jared said, we're going to talk about metronome work today. This is something me and Jared were just talking about. It's one of those things. It's not necessarily the funnest thing for everybody to talk about or to experience when you're a musician, but it's one of those things that's just really, 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 really necessary to develop our sense of rhythm, our confidence in our time. It's one of those things that's just super, super honest with you. It's objectively honest. It's always going to be the same. Sometimes you wake up and you play a little differently, or some days you're faster, some days you're slower, but 120 on the metronome is always 120 on the metronome. And then the other really cool thing about metronomes is that you can really track your progress as a musician. So you can, like I just said, some days you wake up and 120 feels like it's really hard, and the next day it feels like it's a total breeze, right? And that's a really exciting thing to feel as a musician and as a developing musician in particular. So
that's a really good point because so much of what you do as a musician isn't measurable. Right? It's not something that you can put a number to, but the metronome is the one thing that we can we can grade ourselves against the metronome. So
exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And it's a really easy way to, monitor your progress without necessarily, even setting any sort of, I want to get this fast or this fast. You just keep practicing with it and eventually you progress, little by little. So the other thing I really want to start off by talking about is just the importance of rhythm and time. And my whole concept for music, or the way that I think about music, is that we really have three main things going on. We have rhythm, melody, and harmony, right? So melody is a series of notes followed, it's a horrible melody. Right? That's some sort of melody, right? And then the harmony is what I played in my left hand, which is a series of notes layered over each other, stacked on top of each other to create multiple notes, which creates a tonality, or what we call harmony, right? So after we get past the melody and the harmony, right, then we have rhythm.
That almost sounds like the Mario Brothers when you get
That's funny. Yeah, I'm gonna figure that out after this now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are really the main three principles of music, in my eyes. And the cool thing about rhythm, which I like more than anything else, being a percussionist and a drummer, but also just as an instrumentalist, it applies to every instrument. Rhythm's the only thing that every instrument plays, right? So like even a triangle player, he might not have too many melodies going on, right? He doesn't have 12 triangles hanging out, so he can play every note of the chromatic series, right? He doesn't have that, but he's playing a killing rhythm. And the rhythm's really what carries those instruments, right? But as a piano player, rhythm is also important. As you just heard, I took something that was very simple, like these two chords, right, and made something really interesting with them. right? So you can do interesting things with different rhythms,
Right.
essentially, and it's important on all instruments, which is why using a metronome, regardless of your instrument, of course, it's important for drummers. Drummers need to develop an inner sense of time so that they can drive the band. But I really think everybody is responsible for time. Thelonious Monk used to say that in his bands, that every single person in his band is responsible for playing time. And, you know, it's true, especially as a drummer. I notice this, you know, if a bass player is playing a certain way, hi there, then it'll make you play a little bit differently. You know, if a bass player is playing a little bit behind the beat or ahead of the beat, sometimes that'll make me play different on drums. So time is imperative. That's really where I want to start this all off with, is that it's important no matter what instrument you play. Time is really just super, super important. And it's ultimately what is going to make music feel good, right? Harmony sounds really nice. Melodies are really beautiful. But the tempo and that type of stuff, that's what make things feel a certain way. Cool. So the other thing that I'd like to follow that with in terms of feeling is that in my opinion, slow and accurate should always, like, going slow and being accurate should always be the priorities. So like accuracy should always be the priority, and being comfortable. So like being relaxed, comfortable, using proper technique, applying yourself in a way where you're not straining yourself, right? Like you don't want to be like people at the gym who like can't lift the bar but are trying to lift the bar. You don't want to do that. You want to be the guy who's doing comfortable stuff, looks good, using good form.
High reps, low weight. High reps,
low weight. Exactly. Yeah, that's the vibe. So like being slow and accurate will actually get you to speed up faster than if you just try to play at your cusp all the time.
Yeah.
Because then you're not practicing good technique, right? And I'm using piano as an example today because I thought it'd be easy. But, you know, it's the same on guitar, right? If you're not practicing good technique, if you're trying to go and you're not using proper technique in your hand and you're just trying to, you're not going to progress as fast as if you were to really. So it's quality. It's quality of sound, it's quality of your technique, and the quality of the time, which is really what the metronome is used for. So if you're going to practice to a metronome, focus on the quality stuff, right? When you want to play and you want to play fast, just play. Don't worry about the metronome. That's not what the metronome's for. The metronome's for working stuff out.
Right.
Again, these are just my opinions on how I use the metronome, but this is the way I think about it.
I always say to my students, like, you want to go fast, slow down.
Yeah, it's the space between the notes that really gets difficult, right? And that once you understand all the spaces between the notes, it really becomes easier to play with more accuracy. So that being said, the first thing I want to talk about is just using a metronome to count a whole note. So a lot of people, this is a metronome that I use. This app is free. It's called Pro Metronome, but if you just type metronome into the App Store, it's that, and it's that icon right there. I'm sorry, that's pretty blurry.
No, I see it. Yep.
It's a pretty typical one. Most of my students use it or have it.
I use one called Tempo. Same thing.
They're
Free.
all great.
Yeah.
The things I like about this one in particular is that it's got 12 different sounds, and I like to use it acoustically with the drums. So one of the sounds actually cuts like almost as loud as a live drum set. So I like that, and I like that you can put different accents on it. So right now you'll see that I have an accent on one, which will come in handy in this particular instance because we're going to talk about practicing with whole notes. So again, just talking about the space between notes, right? Not focusing necessarily on the speed, but really getting into the space between notes, just playing whole notes. And I'm going to take something fairly simple and something that I hope everybody knows to at least some extent, but a major scale. And this is something that I practice to a metronome a lot. And I mainly, like I said, focus on the way my hand is interacting with the piano, being relaxed, the way I'm holding my body, the quality of the sound. This is a keyboard, so the quality of the sound is not really as easily discernible as it would be with an acoustic instrument like an acoustic guitar or, you know, an acoustic piano. But nonetheless, still trying to work on all these sorts of things. So this is the first way that I would go about using a metronome, which is a whole note. So just playing one note per measure. And really just thinking about...
That's me popping in the chat if you saw
cool.
that. Sorry.
Awesome. Yeah. That's perfect. And And then really just thinking about the space between the notes, like I was saying. So this is our time, and this is me playing the scale. Now we're going to go back down. Good. So that's the least exciting of all of the metronome work that we're going to do. That's why we start there, right? You go slow, you focus on that. Again, you notice how still my posture is, how light the movement is in my fingers, right? I'm not like, right? It's not about, it's about finesse and really being comfortable with the instrument, right? That's why we practice slow, and that's why we start there. Because once you get there, then now we can start to focus on speed or rhythms, things like that. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go to a half note. I use this example, I just scribbled this out real quick so everybody could see, but I call it a rhythm tree. This is a whole note, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. This is the way I like to think about how to break the beat down. You know, for instance, that's our whole note that we were just playing, right? Now we can talk about our half note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. That's our quarter note, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's our eighth note, right? Then, right, that's our 16th note. Sorry, I'm sitting on a cajon, so you can't see it. Right, so, and then back to quarter notes. Right, so one way I like to practice as well, this would be particularly apply to you drummers or percussionists out there. I'll showcase on the cajon just because it's what I have right here. But I like to do all of this in succession. So, you know, so like. Right? Then we can talk about different subdivisions like triplets and things like that. But that's the basic rhythm tree that I would start with. And this is, you know, so the next one is playing half notes. 1, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, focusing on being relaxed, focusing on using the correct fingers. This applies to piano really, but using it as well on guitar if you're practicing, right? Using the correct fingers, using that type of thing. Next, we would go to quarter notes, right? Which is what the metronome's actually playing. So. Right, I'm just practicing. Also, for those of you who play the major scale in more than one octave. I'm just practicing it in one octave to showcase, but the goal of this scale is to be able to get your hand comfortable with the entire instrument. Same on guitar, learn it in multiple octaves if you can. You know, on guitar, I like the 3-note per string version. Right, so that's a 2-octave version. I would even learn more than that. And on piano, I usually like to do 4 octaves, you know. And this is to get my hand really comfortable with the whole piano in here, right? Now all of this feels like it's under my right hand instead of just getting this 1 octave under my hand, right? Then I just feel comfortable in this little octave. I want to feel like the whole hand, like you see those pianists. I don't know if you guys ever check out like Art Tatum or Oscar Peterson or like Scott Joplin, but those guys that are just like they're just, seems like the whole piano is available to them at all times. And guitar players like that too, or drummers like that. It's like, that's the goal, is to have the whole instrument available at all times, right? So even that exercise I was just doing down here on the cajon, you can do that on the snare and then do it on the floor tom and then do it on the rack tom and then alternate between your kick drum and a floor tom while you're keeping quarter notes in your left foot. You know, like make it as interesting for yourself as you want. You can create within these exercises. You don't have to just, you know,
right,
we can get to more. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah. So because it may not be the most fun feeling thing sometimes, you can make it interesting by playing it around, like that's like paradiddles, for instance, for drummers. Like if you're just sitting on a snare drum, paradiddles might not be the most fun thing, but you split that up between two drums, and now it sounds pretty cool. And then you start putting some accents in and everything, and it gets really cool. So
exactly, and then you put a quarter note in your bass drum, and then you add your hi hat on 2 and 4, and then you just make it in, or you try to play a different rhythm in your, you make it as interesting for yourself as your coordination will allow you to.
Can you show just quickly how to set up your metronome and like?
Yeah, sure.
So
the way I usually use my metronome is I'll usually be playing something when I first sit down to practice. The first thing I do is just play, just improvise something, whether it's in time, whether it's out of time. Whatever it is, I just sit down and I just play and I improvise. And usually what will happen is I'll get to a point where I'm playing something that I kind of enjoy playing, whether it's a song that I already know that I'm having fun with, or whether it's something I'm creating new. There's a function called the tap tempo, and this is a really awesome function on all metronomes. If your metronome doesn't have this, then get one that does, because it's really helpful, especially if you're practicing a song. You can tap out the tempo. So you just tap this, and you can see it says keep tapping. And as it's tapping, you can see that little number is moving, right? And that number is moving to the tempo that I'm tapping with my finger. So now, if I hit play, you can see that it's playing the tempo that I was just tapping. From there out, the metronome is fairly analog. It's pretty mechanical. So there's a wheel. Most metronomes are like this, left goes down, right goes up.
Yep.
Pause, stop. Mine has all these settings with the numbers for the sounds. I really like that. That's important for me. This one also has the accents, so I can set. There's three different levels. So, right. So there's three different pitches there. That can be helpful, especially if you're working on odd time signature stuff, or if you're trying to work on playing over the bar line, like playing 3 against 4 or 5 against 4 or 7 against 4, because then it's nice to have a big 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's hard to count that and play in 7 at the same time, but you get the idea. You can have a big accent. Yeah. So that's helpful for me. You can also turn off the accents. Some of my students don't like the accents. It's also kind of restrictive, because then if you mess up, you can't just start right again. You have to wait for beat 1 to come back around. Right. Which sometimes messes up some of my students when they're like, because then all of a sudden the accent's on 2 and they're like, wait, what? Why is that there now?
So that's like probably a good, when you're first starting out, maybe don't use the accents, so that it's really just keeping time and it doesn't really matter where 1 is. But then as you get more comfortable with it, start adding in some accents, because it's going to make you perceive the beat a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, the accent on 1 is cool too, especially if you're working on beats, because the tendency for beginner drummers sometimes is to flip the beat, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden the snare drum happens where the bass drum happens, and now the whole beat's backwards. And then in a band setting, it's like, whoa, what's going on right now? Like everything just got turned around. So sometimes it helps to have the accent. I think it's really just whatever feels comfortable. Whatever you're again, this is like as far as you want to take it, because I won't go all the way down the wormhole, but I'll start to explain some more advanced ways to use it a little bit later on. But yeah, I would say, outside of that, find a sound that is pleasing to you. Another thing you can do is that there's a lot of drum machines available online that are free. So if you're not a drummer, this is a really good thing to have. But if you're a guitarist and you want to work on writing and you're uninspired and you want to find something to play over that will keep you in time, but is not a metronome, there's tons of, just type in online free drum machine. We're just free drum machine most of the time. And like several different websites will pop up. There's all these different synth makers making this stuff available to people all over the world. And they're really helpful tools. I use them a lot too, actually, just to play drums too, because it's fun to play as a drummer sometimes against another drummer. So there's a drum machine playing, and then I can decide to play with the drum machine, or I can decide to play against the drum machine. You know, I can decide to play over here or under here or over there, or I can be over on the others. You know what I mean? It's like you can experiment with it. So, but yeah,
GarageBand also has a fantastic drummers
virtual drummer thing in there. Is scary.
Drummer, so if you have, it's so good.
It's gonna put me out of work. That virtual drummer. It's like
if you have any Apple product, you have GarageBand, so you have a drummer, and it's similar. You just set your tempo on the session, and it will play to that. And yeah, you can get into swing, you can get into fill, like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can go like, what is it? There's like, you can pick the different guys' names. Like, AJ is a SoCal, you know, surfer dude. He likes to play the Beach Boys.
Right.
It's kind of scary. I have some friends who have showed me recordings, and I've been like, dude, who played drums on this? And they're like, oh, it's like the Logic drummer. I'm like, man.
Which the Logic and GarageBand drummers, same drummer, right?
Yeah, so, same drummers. Maybe they have different names. Yeah, they have different names.
Right.
Okay, cool. So there's lots of different ways that you can use, lots of different ways you can access having some sort of timekeeping device. Like I said, this is like, as a drummer, this is even teachers I've had have said that if you don't have an analog one of these, you can't play drums, because like having it on your cell phone is kind of distracting to have your cell phone there while you're practicing too. So it's a little complicated.
Or turn on airplane mode while you're doing it, so you can't.
That's a good way to do it too. You know? Yeah, there's so many. I used to have this big gray box called Dr. Beat, which had like these little faders on it.
Yeah.
Has since got messed up in a flood, but I loved that thing. That thing was so cool. Yeah. And I used to have a setting where it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and it was pretty hilarious. Okay, the other thing I'll say actually is that you can set. So let's talk about time signature real quick before we move on. Yeah. So 4/4 is what that says there, and for anybody who doesn't know those two numbers. The way time signatures are traditionally written isn't that way of 4-4, but it's usually 4/4, like that. And what that means is that the top number represents the amount of beats that we have. So we have 4, and the bottom number represents the type of beats that we have. So you look at it as if it's a fraction, right? So you imagine that the top number is whatever, and the bottom number is, in this case, 4. So we have 4 quarter notes.
Right.
So 4 and then the fraction, right? So if it was 4/8, that would be 4/8 notes, right? Does that sound very different from our ears? No, but it would be written completely different.
Right.
And this is why in the age of written music, time signatures were so imperative. Now we just think like 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 12, 6, you know, but nobody really cares what the second number. Nobody really is like, oh, is this 6/8 or is this 6/12? You know, I can't tell. Like, it's not important. It's 3, it's 6. You know, a lot of people hear things in 6 and 2, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? Like, right? That could be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? Or it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, you know.
Or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? 1, 2,
exactly.
You can perceive all different types of ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I usually base it on what the drummer's playing, where the backbeat is. And the backbeat is a really important term. If nobody's ever heard that, if you're not a drum student, you probably wouldn't. The backbeat is usually where the snare drum falls. So in 6/8, it would be 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, right?
Sorry, I shouldn't clap. I forget that there's a delay. I'm like trying to do it. I'm like,
oh yeah,
that's not gonna line up.
That's okay. Yeah, and then there's, you know, in rock music, usually the backbeat's on like 2 and 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's usually how I find the time, is based on where the backbeat is.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then, so speaking of that, inside of these apps, usually in mine, you access it by, how do you access it? Oh, it's got a little 4/4 there in the bottom corner.
Yeah.
So you can hit that, and then it'll pull up this, which has all sorts of crazy subdivisions and triplets and blah, blah, blah. I think you have to pay for that stuff. I don't pay for any of that stuff. So I just have 3/4, 4/4, I have 5, 4. I can go up to 16. So that's pretty cool. That you can go up to 16. That means I could play 16th notes, right? And then I could even put accent patterns in here, so that it went something like, instead of just being like, I could play it over something like.
Sometimes the cajon's cutting out.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Wait. You know what? The original sound helps. Here you go. This might help. Right. So instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I have. Right. So you could add things into it to make it more interesting. Again, mine most of the time stays on 4, maybe sometimes 5, maybe sometimes 7. I think I practice odd time signatures sometimes, but if I do, it's usually just songs. Sometimes
Right.
the metronome helps, but I think that's it in terms of setting up the metronome, though.
Yeah,
I think that's
that was
all
great.
That was probably, find a sound that you like. That's the main thing, because if it's like teek, took, and it's driving you crazy, it's like it'll drive you crazy. Certain sounds just drive you crazy if they repeat.
Right. This is.
So,
I mean, it's like it's like that. It's like that drip torture.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
a metronome can totally be just like that one drip on your forehead.
I try to find the sounds that are most like wood blocks or claves, because as a drummer, that's something that I like to play over anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like this.
And they cut through.
Yep, that sounds like claves to me. That sounds good. I can jam to that. That makes me feel good about the way it sounds. It's not like beep boop boop boop, or like I said that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That was like, it sounded like Oompa Loompas, like counting time. It was weird.
That's great.
Cool. So we covered whole notes and half notes. The next thing I'd like to talk about is quarter notes, which is what the beat is, right? I don't think we got there.
No.
So I'll just do 2 octaves for sake of time. Right, so the C major scale.
Yay.
Cool. So that's quarter notes. That's kind of the most typical way to use the metronome, I would say, and that's kind of the only way that a lot of people use the metronome. I would not let that be the only way you use the metronome. So now let's go the other way. Let's talk about. So right now we were kind of allowing the metronome to count the beats in between point A and point B for our notes.
Right.
Right. So we had tick. C, tick, 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 D, tick, 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 E, right? Now let's go the other way. So now we're going to play eighth notes against this quarter note. If anybody's unfamiliar with these rhythms, like I said, this is called a rhythm tree. For every whole note, there is 2 half notes. For every half note, there is 2 quarter notes. For every quarter note, there is 2 eighth notes. For every eighth note, there is 2 16th notes. For every 16th note, there is 2 32nd notes. For every 32nd, blah, 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 right? Nobody plays faster than that. So the point being is that it's really just about breaking this one big beat, cutting it in half, and you cut that in half, then you cut that in half, then you cut that in half. So it kind of looks like the roots of a tree when it's going down.
Yeah.
I think that's why they call it a rhythm tree. I teach that to all my drum students. It's a pretty helpful way to understand how to talk about subdividing, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So we just went from a whole note to a half note to a quarter note. Now we're going to talk about the next subdivision, which is an eighth note. So now we're going to take this, and every time it ticks, I'm going to play 2 of the notes. So instead of playing C, D, E, F, right now I'm going to play C, D, E, F, G, A, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, simple. That's the next subdivision. After that, we would have 16th notes, I guess. So, right, fast, but that's the. So that's fast at that tempo. I wouldn't, again, that's not something I would practice at that tempo, because that's, at that point, I'm abandoning technique. At that point, I'm abandoning, that was me laughing and Jared laughing at how silly that sounded, but that's not something I would practice at that speed, not unless it was comfortable at that speed. What I would practice which is I didn't include in this rhythm tree. This is the more basic version of the rhythm tree, but it's triplets.
Right.
And triplets are imperative. They are the coolest. You need to know about triplet subdivisions. They're really what makes everything in the world go around. It's what makes things. Jared mentioned the word swing before, right? What makes swing is the idea of having triplets and then taking out the middle one. That's what makes a swung eighth note. That's at least in musical, like in analytical terms, that's the most simple way to, explain what a swung eighth note is, right? We have our triplets, and we just omit the bottom one. Boom, 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 bam, boom, boom, boom. Right? Same thing with like the 6/8 sort of thing, right? And then you speed that up. So actually, let's talk about that before we move to triplets. You can also practice playing swung to a metronome, right? I'm sorry. Let me pick a better tempo. Sorry, that was confusing at that tempo. So at 102. Right, and I had to
play straight eighth notes again against the swing eighth notes so you can hear the difference.
So this is straight eighth notes. Swung. Right, so swung is more typical of like right, so more like a jazzy sort of feel, or like a right, so more like a blues swung.
Right.
A lot of American music is swung, right? Yeah. So jazz, blues, a lot of like bluegrass, even like a digga 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 digga.
Right. I was gonna say even folk and bluegrass has like a little bit of a swing to it.
Yeah,
right?
And it's different. Like I said, this triplet kind of feel that I'm describing to you is very much so like the way that you would write it down. But this is very much so music that was oral tradition, that wasn't written down, right? It was music that was heard and then played. And those examples I just gave were just kind of haphazard, immediate example. None of those should be taken as forms of jazz or blues by any means. But that's the idea, right? That sort of rhythm thing. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is triplets, and this is kind of as far as metronome stuff that I think everybody should work on. This is in that ballpark still. After this, I'll explain something that I teach to some of my more advanced drum students, and then I don't think everybody needs to work on, but it is very cool and fun way to work with the metronome too. So we'll talk about that in a second, but right now let's talk about triplets. So what a triplet is where instead of, like I said, with those eighth notes, that's 2 eighth notes per every quarter note, right? So that means you have 8 notes in a measure. Let's just go back to the quarter note. So instead of dividing the quarter note into 2 equal parts, now we're going to divide it into 3 equal parts. And the way this sounds is we have the quarter note, and then we're going to have the eighth notes. So instead of having this be 2 equal divisions, now we're going to make it into 3 equal divisions. Good. So this concept of triplets is really cool. I was just using it in one of the examples I just did, actually. So I went from playing swing to playing triplets. I went. Right? And it's a different rhythm. It feels different. That one's going up pretty frantically. So it gives you kind of an excitement, you know. You can also use them rhythmically, like. Right. So again, that's all the same chord progression, just so you can hear some of the different things over the same concept. But triplets are super cool, and they're good to work on because again, now we're working on subdividing.
Right? How do you count triplets when you?
I count triplets. So some people count them triplet. I don't like counting them like that because then you don't know which triplet you're on in the measure. So I count 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2. Because then I could say
I'm the same way.
Yeah, because then I can
say the trip on the 3rd beat.
Yeah, accent the length of beat 4.
Right?
Yeah,
now, if you're just learning the feel of triplets, like for younger musicians, I usually tell them use the word lollipop because
lollipop. That's good. I like that.
Lollipop. It has the feel. Its word is the rhythm of it. So
yeah,
if you're struggling with it at first, that's a good one to try out.
Yeah, fit lollipop evenly into the space of a quarter note. That would be a good way to do it. So put on a quarter note.
Practice doing that before you play.
Lollipop, 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 lolly, 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 lolly. So those are just straight A's, right? If you just say lolly, 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 lolly.
Right.
Then if you try to fit the pop in there, now you're saying triplets. Yeah. Lollipop, 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 lollipop. That's a good one. I like that, Jared. I'm going to steal that from you.
Dude, now this has been the best part about doing these clinics is we get to see how each other teach. Yeah. And we're like giving each other tips, and I'm like, oh, wow. So we're like all getting better at teaching from like listening to each other. I've been meaning to do this for a while where like I've thought like we should all take lessons from each other because if we took lessons from each other, we'd see how everybody teaches and we'd pick up a lot more. So
yeah, that's super valid.
So
cool.
Thanks for that, COVID. We got to jump into that.
The positives, the plus side.
Yeah.
So with triplets, I do the same thing. I basically try to squeeze 3. You know, another way you can do this if you want to work on this is put your metronome on 3 in 3/4, and with an accent on beat 1, right? And then go a little faster. So now we have, throw all my technology to itself. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So I'll take the major scale. It just so happens that the major scale happens to fit with triplets into 3 octaves. So if you're practicing the major scale in triplets, 3 octaves is a really good way to practice it, and you'll see why when it comes around. So we have... Good. So that's playing triplets, right? That's having the metronome playing 8th note triplets, though. So now let's go back to the concept I was talking about of subdividing, which is taking the beat and breaking it down into smaller beats inside your head, right? So we're not going to use the metronome to count all those triplets now. Now it's on us to play the triplets. And I'm going to put it back to 4/4. This is at 100. This is going to be a little fast, but this is the vibe. So again... Right, so let me slow it down and play some more. Sorry. So again, here, this is at 77 now. Good. Again, always thinking about sound, always thinking about touch, technique, always thinking about dynamics, right? Not every note has to be, you don't have to play the instrument as hard as you can every time you play it, right? It doesn't have to be bum, 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 right? Maybe try to play all of your, maybe try to work on all of this at your regular dynamic, and then maybe try to play all of this as quiet as you possibly can with still making it sound good, right? This is something I'll do a lot, so like... Again, this is a keyboard, so the sensitivity is not that of an acoustic instrument, but the vibe is like totally different. And if I use a better sound, you know, this is soft, and this is hard, right? So it's a pretty drastic sound. This is a Rhodes sound, so like,
yeah,
right. So you can really tell when I'm playing dynamically.
And I find it more difficult to actually play softer, fast.
Softer is always harder. Softer,
right.
Yeah, softer and fast is like
you're holding back a little bit. So
and it's really like I said, just getting that like floaty sort of. You wanna just. There's a book by a man named Kenny Werner, and it's kind of mainly written towards jazz musicians, and classical musicians, or maybe mainly like collegiate musicians. But it's called Effortless Mastery, and the whole concept is like meditation through playing, essentially, to paraphrase the book. But one of the things he talks about a lot is like imagine somebody else is doing it for you. Like imagine somebody else like picked up your arm and like you're just observing your arm doing like if you let your body relax and you do things slowly, your body has a way of finding the correct mechanics. And this is the same with like athletes, like actual mechanics, right? Like they figure out the way that they have to move their body to use that certain wrench or something. Right. Your body has a way, if you just let it do its thing, it figures things out. So always try to stay out of the way of yourself. That's the way I like to put it. Just stay out of the way. Like don't, again, even with the triplets, this is a piano player thing, but if I'm playing triplets, I don't abandon my fingering. Right? It gets more complicated because there's groups of 3s and 4s, and now we're not just playing 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. Now we're playing 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2. Right now it gets a little bit complicated with our fingering. That's a very piano centric point to make, but nonetheless important. Actually, no, it's guitar centric too because you want to maintain your fingerings on guitar as well. If you were playing same thing on drums, if you're playing paradiddles, right? You could play paradiddles and triplets. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. You know what I mean? Like it gets a little complicated, but they're there. You can do them. Play that real quick, just so you can hear. So I'll accent every first beat.
I don't think I've ever done that.
That's in 3. You can play them in 5. You can play them in 7. I used to have a teacher who used to make me play them in 7 between my hands and my bass drum. So like it's just like absolute mind workouts, right? Like there's a certain level of practicing music once you get past playing things that you want to play, where you're just working on things that you'll never even want to play. You're just working on them to make yourself better and more coordinated and looser so you can play the things that you do want to play better, which is a really weird concept. I try to get away from that type of practicing. I just want to work on things that I actually want to apply.
Right. Well, I guess you could kind of look at it as like that's like if somebody's training for athletic event, though, you lift more weight than like what you're actually needing to do when you do the activity, or when you're drilling anything. You're in like a, if you're playing soccer, you're usually drilling it more than it's actually going to happen in the performance of it or the game, right?
That's exactly how I would think about it. That's exactly what it is. Just getting it's making things that are insanely hard feel easy.
Yes.
So that things that are not that things that were at the cusp of challenging, now you're playing this type of stuff. Now this stuff feels like it's like, okay, cool, I know this, there's a new level of comfort. There's also another Kenny. I'm really pushing this Kenny Werner book right now, man. I swear he's not paying me. I'm just reading it right now. But one thing that he talks about, it will come back to me. I just totally slipped on what I was going to say. But he's really just this concept of effortlessness, right? And really just like focusing on allowing the instrument to do what the instrument's supposed to do, and the instrument of your body to do what it's supposed to do. Cool. So we went over eighth note subdivisions, then we went over triplet eighth note subdivisions. Now let's talk about 16th note subdivisions. This sounds kind of overwhelming if you've never played 16th notes before. When you see them on paper, it looks fast. There's like 4 little dots with little lines, and they're intimidating. Go slow, right? Right here, what we're focusing on, the purpose of this exercise is to focus on the space between notes. I'll start by playing 16th notes, and then I'll show you how I would actually exercise this myself in like terms of actually applying it to an exercise. So let's put the Metronome at 60. This is also, I practice with my metronome on 40 sometimes. I practice with my metronome on 35. That stuff is scary. It's scary. Do you know how much space there is? It's like...
Yeah. It's actually scarier than playing right?
Oh my God. It's like where... It's like you like...
Because you have
totally
to
lost
patience.
in this... Yeah, you're lost in this abyss of space. You know what I mean? There's just like... And then you're gone. And then it's like, wait a second. It's like when you see like those little bouncing balls.
Yeah.
It's just like bouncing around. It's like a screensaver.
Screensaver.
Yeah. That's what it feels like. There's no like all the lines feel like they're different lengths.
That reminds me of the Office episode when like they wait for it to hit the corner.
Yeah.
The graphic, like they're like, oh,
it never does.
Always misses the corner, and then
Just
the one
misses.
time, and they're all like, yeah.
So 60 is a scary one, but it's a good one. 60, what I was just talking about, 40 and 35, those are like, that's pretty serious. Like you're working on metronome stuff. That's like really, really, really hard to play with. I would not suggest that if you're starting out. When I say go slow, that's not what I mean. That's like, I mean go like 80.
Yeah, I would say 60 to... I usually start at 60 to 80 with a lot of my students. When they're first starting out, 60... Now, think about it. 60 beats per minute. What's that? That's 1 second.
That's a second, yeah.
Right? So if 60 beats
second
per
hand
minute...
on a clock.
One beat is 1 second, right? So... And actually that... There's a whole nother thing, like, what's a pretty good normal resting pulse rate? Around 60 beats per minute. So like that pulse is very natural to humans.
It's a very human pulse.
Yes.
Good. So this is 60. I'll play some 16th notes at 60. Oops, sorry, those would have been 8th notes. Let me try again. Okay, and as you can see there, even my first octave was garbage. The first octave I played was no good. It was not in time. By the time I got to the second quarter note, I was off. I was like a little bit ahead, right? And this is good, right? I practice with a metronome every day, and I still was like 16. And even when I started, I was like 16th notes, huh? You know, granted, usually when I work with a metronome, I set the speed, and then I'll just like rock with it at that speed, and I work on different subdivisions. And so, like, if this is what I was practicing for today, I would hang out at 60 for hours. The thing about 60 BPM is that it's also 120 BPM.
Right.
Right? If you subdivide it into 8th notes. Then if you subdivide that into 16th notes, then you're also playing at 240 BPM.
Right.
Right? And then if you divide that even more, you could be playing at 480. It just goes on and on. You can... when you start to think about triplets. So again, this is now to get more into this is more difficult right now. We're subdividing. Go slow. That's actually still kind of fast to play.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not comfortable with your major scale, I'd maybe even go slower. This is 50. So like same thing. I started rushing again, right? Right? And it's all about being patient, always focusing on fingerings, always focusing on time, right? Really focusing on the time and focusing on flowing between the notes. Cool. One other thing I'd like to talk about before I talk about subdividing this more is you can put in accents. So with the swung thing, for anybody out there who wants to play jazz convincingly, I went to school for jazz and to study mainly composition and arranging, drumming, and as well as piano. And in one of my piano lessons, one of my teachers said something to me that blew my mind still to this day. Two things actually that I'll share with you. One thing is practice your scales going both ways, right? But start practicing going down sometimes. We always start at the bottom of scales, and we always go up, and then undoubtedly the descending is weaker, right? We do it as an afterthought almost.
Right.
How many cool lines have you heard people play that go The descending thing's cool, man. Descending's cool. We don't need to be, like there's so many cool guitar lines and things that are descending, right? There's so many cool things in general that
actually sounds cooler usually descending than
descending's cool, man. There's no reason we should be discriminatory against descending. We should descend. It's good to descend. Sometimes descend first. But the thing that he told me that really blew my mind, for anybody who wants to play swing music, for anybody who wants to play music that swings, is accenting the offbeats. This is really, really hard, especially if you're a pianist and you're trying to focus on fingerings again, and then you go into playing triplets. So now you're thinking about fingerings, accents, rhythm, you're working on your time, right? So this is the cool thing about working with a metronome, is like you're exercising all of these parts of your musicianship at once. It's like it's just a tool to keep you on track. So let me show you what that would sound like real quick, just really quick before we move on. Right? So I'll go slower so you can really hear. If you do that a couple times, like if you work on that if I work on that a few days in a row, I'll speak from personal experience. If I do that a few days in a row and then I go to solo over a jazz song or go to play the melody of a jazz song, my phrasing is miles better because that's how they phrase in that style of music. The upbeats, what they call syncopations, right? Beats that are not on downbeats, so down, up, down, up, down, up. Those upbeats are almost more important in swing music than the downbeats. And a lot of those musicians, you can tell who's playing by where they place their upbeat, which is kind of crazy to think about. But like, I can listen to ride cymbal patterns, Art Blakey, Max Roach, Elvin Jones, Philly Joe Jones, and Roy Haynes, and tell you who's playing just on their ride cymbal pattern alone. Like undoubtedly, just by where they place that upbeat and how much they like accent it and lean into it. Elvin Jones's upbeat is accented in his ride cymbal patterns. It's crazy sounding, but it just feels, it has this cyclical sort of like African jungle 6/8 sort of rolling. And that's
different from what you're used to. You learn first by playing on the downbeat. So this is really playing on the upbeat and accenting the upbeat. So that's it's going to feel weird at first because you're so used to accenting where that metronome is. So this,
you have to be comfortable.
Like you're going to accent where the metronome isn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. It's this subdividing thing. So when I practice this subdividing thing, we're going to go back to 50 now. Let me get 50 in my head for a second. So the way I would practice this is I would practice quarter notes. I'm going to skip quarter note triplets right now because quarter note triplets are complicated. But if you understand quarter note triplets, kudos to you. They're very, very cool. They're a complicated rhythm. They're hard to hear, especially against a metronome, so I'm not going to go into it right now. Get a lesson with me, and we'll talk about quarter, or Zoom me privately, and we'll have a private session about quarter note triplets.
Hey, we could do another session on that.
Dude, when I was just in Colombia, I had a friend who I was like playing to a metronome, and I was practicing just on a pad. We were staying, we were like in a hostel, and I'm practicing on a pad, and he's just looking at me, just like, "What did you just do?" He's like hearing me play a consistent rhythm against the metronome, and he was just mind-boggled, like couldn't believe the quarter. And I spent like 3 hours trying to explain to him how it, like we're on a bus ride, and I'm like writing in a notebook, trying to explain to him how it relates, like drawing diagrams. You know, and they have different names for things there. Like they call like a quarter note's a corche, okay. and a half note's a blanco, and a quarter note's a negro. They have all different names for things.
Okay.
So it's super complicated, but that concept and that experience of me trying to explain it to him made me realize that is not something that I could really even explain in less than a couple hours. So I'm not going to get into it. Okay. So I'll play quarter notes, then I'll play eighth notes, then I'll play eighth note triplets, then I'll play 16th notes. After I play 16th notes, I'm going to come back down. I'm going to play eighth note triplets, eighth notes, and then I'm going to go back to playing quarter notes. This is a very practical way to apply using the metronome at one tempo, non-stop, This is like, I don't know how long this will take. It probably won't take too long, but like 2 minutes. This is an excellent way to warm up. You're working on subdivision, you're working on your time, you're working on technique, you're working on your fingerings, you're working on understanding different rhythms, all while you're focusing on playing in time. Right? This is something that, like, even if you don't want to work on this while you're like playing your tune or while you're reading, sometimes it's hard while you're reading to work on it. It doesn't have to be an all the time thing, but it's a tool and it can be used. So this is how I would use this. This is quarter note. So I'll just play one octave for ease of. Focus on being relaxed all the time. Eighth notes. I'll go 2 octaves for this. Eighth note triplets. Oh no, I had an alarm. Let me turn off the accent too. So we're at eighth note triplets. That's intense. There's a lot of notes there, right? Now we have 16th notes. Right? Right? And then you can go back down. So for sake of time, I'm not going to get into that. But that's a way, like, with drums, Jared mentioned a paradiddle, for instance. I'll sit down and play paradiddle as a quarter note, play it as an eighth note, or the elusive quarter note triplet.
Yeah.
The eighth note triplet, 16th note triplet. If I can hang on drums, I can hang a lot faster than I can on piano, because on piano it's a different tactical motion for each note, whereas on drums there's rebound in play, there's lots of techniques, molar grip, drop pull, push pull, lots of different things. Drumming is very, I understand it now more than I did when I was playing. Now I understand more teaching it, because I have to understand how to convey these ideas to people. So I understand, but there's a lot of things happening in here with drums or piano. What I will say though is, again, relax, go slow, focus on those things. Yeah. The next thing I'll talk about, and these are kind of the last concepts I want to talk about. I know this has been a little long, but the last concept I want to talk about is putting the metronome on beats other than beat 1. So even that was just putting it on beat 1. I'll give examples with the cajon, because this will be easier with the cajon for you guys to hear in relationship. Okay, cool. So this is 70. So we can hear 70 as 1, 2, 3, 4. We can hear it as 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's putting it on 1 and 3, right? Now I'm going to switch it to being on 2 and 4. This is really helpful because 2 and 4 are the backbeat, right? So these are the 2 beats that you really want to lock in, right? 1 and 3 are your bass drum beats. They're good to lock in, but once they're locked in, you got them. How often do we really focus on where we're putting the backbeat? And this is a really interesting way to play, like, I don't know how many people out there are listening to Jay Dilla or things like that, but a lot of these beats where in hip-hop or like a lot of modern music, you have the snare drum or the bass drum kind of jumping the beat a little bit, that sort of weird stuff comes from people just manipulating where their backbeat is, right? And we do this by using a metronome and kind of figuring it out from there. So this will be this is 2 and 4 now, right? A good way to do this is just to say 2 and 4 and then fill in the other numbers. So 2, 4, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4,
1, right? So now I'm hearing this as an upbeat, right? This is actually not even happening on a downbeat at all, right? So if you want to talk about subdivisions, what better way to work on subdivisions than to actually have your subdivision being played, right? So that's why it's great to work with a faster metronome sometimes too. You can hear, for instance, that was 70, so let's go 143. So this is 380. Right? That's really annoying to listen to. That being said, that can be really helpful if you're trying to work on playing like 16th note hi-hat grooves or something. Or if you're trying to work on... And you want to work on that sort of robotic, like ba ba da 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 da, like, you know, you want to have that sort of sound if that's your thing, which is totally cool. That's a great way to practice. The cool thing about subdividing is now you're the metronome, right? Now you're responsible for beat 1. Now you're responsible for the downbeat, and this is kind of something almost secondary. This is almost like now you can think of this as a clave or something else, right? So let me find it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4
Yeah,
1.
that's
1 1 1 2 3 4 1 1. Everybody now 1 1 2 3 4. Right? It's like that's like, and now where you hear that, like, right? That's like, I don't know. That's like a whole dance track in itself now, just being just with the metronome on the upbeat. That's really that's an advanced, like, it takes a while for you to put on a metronome and be able to hear it as a secondary sound, like hear it as an instrument as opposed to being a timekeeper. I learned this from, I think I learned this from a video. Oh, you know what? It was one of my favorite drummers, Nate Wood, who everybody should check him out. He's got a band called Four where he plays bass, keys, drums, and sings all at the same time, and it's really, really musical. A lot of things like that sound like they're like a gimmick or something, but he does like Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads, and he does all his own original music too, and it's really, really quite fantastic. I've seen him a couple times, and I got to talk to him at Ortlieb's after a show that he played there one time. He's a New York guy, but he told me that in a conversation he had with the Snarky Puppy guys one night, that they were all like, it was like 7 o'clock in the morning after a festival, and they had all been jamming all night, and there was just like one of these epic, like 150 people, everybody from the festival is jamming. And he said the drummer from Snarky Puppy got up and was like falling over, like was tired, was totally out of it. And he said he sat down and he just played like a clock. And he said he went over to him after and was like, "Man, how did you do that? Like, you were like barely able to talk, and then you sat down at the drums and you were just like playing perfect time, you know?" And he's like, "Man, I practiced with the metronome on the upbeats." That was all he had to say. So I always remember that, and I love Snarky Puppy, and their drummers are always top notch. So the upbeat thing's cool, man, because like I said, you become the metronome. You're kind of responsible for the time. Again, that's not the end of this, you know. There's 16 beats on there, so you could put a rhythm in if you want. You could put a clave in. Right? Another cool thing to do is to put the metronome on and then play rhythms. I'll just do this really quick, but like... Or like arpeggios. Right? Or you could play, like... Or you can pick cool rhythm to play against it. Right? Those were all a C major 7 chord. Me just taking the notes and playing different ideas, right? So you can play rhythms to it. You can go as far as you want to go with a metronome. But I will say one thing that I think is really important to say before I leave, and that's that when I do practice, if I'm ever uninspired while I'm practicing, if I ever feel like I'm practicing something and I don't really, I'm losing focus, or I'm not, especially that actually, if you're losing focus or you're finding it hard to concentrate, right? Don't worry about the material you're working on at that second. If it's a song or something, the tap tempo is helpful, right? Tap out the tempo, right? And then put on the metronome and just jam to the metronome. The metronome is, me and Jared were talking about this. It's your best friend. It's the one who's really honest with you. It's the guy who's like, hey man, you're not in time right now. It sounds good, you know. It sounds cool when you're playing to the track because there's another drummer playing and there's 7 guitars and 150 vocals and compressors and whatever, you know what I mean? It's easy to be distorted. But when you're playing along to a metronome, there's no lying. There's no confusion. It's very evident what is working and what is not, and that is a really cool thing to do. And what I will say from my own experience is if I'm feeling uninspired and I put on the metronome and start playing, hours will pass. And like an hour will pass and I'll still be playing with the metronome at 60, and I'll play like I'm playing at 60, I'm playing at 120, I'm playing, you know, at 180 triplets. I'm like I'm always using all these concepts I was just talking about and throwing different ideas out there, but just having something keeping time and having something to really focus on. Yeah. Right? Outside of material, because material is something to focus on. Right? Material, like learning a song, you know. Right. But just focusing on time and like making something feel good, it's a worthwhile excursion. It's a worthwhile use of your practicing, because if something feels good and your time is better, right? If your playing feels better and your time is better, then every other aspect of your playing is going to be benefited from that. You know, right. When you go to play the song rhythm is half the battle or more on most instruments. So, yeah. I mean, that's why, like, I started as a drummer. Keaton, I think you started as a drummer, too. I started as a guitar player, actually. But, oh, really? But yeah, it's the same. Yeah, I started playing guitar first, but it's the same, you know, it's the same thing. Well, like, I know a lot of people have said to me, though, that, like, because, you know, they say, like, how do you play so many different instruments? And I'd say, like, well, when I played drums first, it made it easier for me to jump into other instruments because I already understood rhythm well. Yeah. Exactly. Once I had rhythm well, then it made it very easy to, because again, that applies to all different instruments. Yeah, it's really, people ask me the same question a lot, too, being multi-instrumentalist as me and you are. The thing, I go back to what I said at the beginning, which is really that there's a triangle of music for me, you know, and it's melody, rhythm, and harmony. Yeah. And no instrument, you know, even drums, people say they don't have harmony or rhythm, or harmony or melody. There's totally melody. Listen to Max Roach play a drum solo. There's so much melody in the drums. You know, he'll play, go check out this dude, Ari Honig. He'll play entire melodies using his elbow to bend the heads, right? There's totally melody. And then in that, your 2 drums can be, I tune my toms and fifths. So there's harmony there. Yeah. Right? So I do the same thing. I use the same thing with recording, that there's 4 things. Harmony, melody, harmony, rhythm, and then pad is the 4th one. And pad is harmony as well. Usually it's built in, but it's just it's like the counter of rhythm, right? Yeah, the opposite. The opposite of rhythm. And pad is just something that's held, right? Yeah. Like if you think of an orchestra that's just all holding a long note, that's a pad. If a keyboard can play pad a lot of the time, guitarists can play pads. Most of the instruments can play pads, but you know, certain instruments tend to pad more, right? For sure, yeah, and other instruments are more rhythmic, for sure. And there's also, you know, you can play what are called like ostinatos or vamps, which are, you know, guitar. I like doing this stuff on guitar a lot too, where, you know, you like. And underneath there's all sorts of other things happening, right? But the guitar part is repeating almost like, it's like, it's not a pad necessarily, but like a vamp or an ostinato.
Right.
But yeah, the thing about playing, a lot of our students at the school play a lot of different instruments too, and I think for me it's really just like once you understand rhythm, harmony, and melody, it's just understanding the mechanics
of
and
that
the technical aspect of the instrument. Yeah, is that easier with some instruments?
Because instruments are just tools to make music, right?
Exactly. So it's like this C major scale I was playing the whole class. That's the same C major scale on a guitar. I was just figuring out the fingering.
Right.
And I can play it down here, or I can play it up here. Right? Then the rhythm I want to play with it is my choice, right? And then the harmony I choose to apply from that.
All right, we're going a little long here now.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I know.
Talk about music.
Here's
stuff
the thing
all day.
with me and Keaton is we can talk music for hours and hours and hours, but we won't put you guys through that. Right? At least this time. At least this
not right
time.
now.
We'll give you a good hour 15. This is pretty much how Keaton and I we'll play gigs together and be up until all hours of the night, just standing outside of the gig talking for hours. So,
yep.
But like I said, we'll spare you guys a little bit of that. Well, thanks, Keaton, man. This was awesome.
No problem, guys. No problem.
So,
I appreciate.
I learned a lot. Andrew's saying hi. He's waving hi over there.
I'll see you in a second, Andrew. We got a lesson in a couple hours.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So I wonder what you'll talk about today.
I'm sure it'll be playing with a metronome.
No, he's like, please no. I just did an hour.
All I've heard about is metronomes.
But thanks so much, dude. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Keep track. We got a couple cool clinics coming up this week. Other ones. Tomorrow's improv, introduction to improv with Erica Corbo, which is going to be really cool. Then Thursday is mic technique and stage presence with Cecilia. And then Friday's another stunt guitar with Rob Kraft doing sweet picking. So we got something for everybody. Yeah, exactly. It's just going to be...
I can't sweep pick for the life.
No, neither can I. So that's why I mean, like I said, I'm getting great lessons out of all these too. So
there was a like a 6-month period where like I had like 1 or 2 sweeps under my hand. You know, after that I abandoned.
Yeah, exactly. All right, y'all. Well, we'll see you another time, and peace out.